Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time this morning to come and join us to talk about our webinar today, the talent shift. I can see there's still quite a few joining. It's clocking up, so I'm going to ramble probably a little bit as I introduce this first slide to you all and give people a chance to join. My name is Jon Wilson. I'm the CEO of Totaljobs Group. And the focus for today's webinar is essentially looking at the career change trends that we're seeing in the world at the moment. We can pretty much all agree that the world of recruiting is, we're living in interesting times, for want of a better phrase. And so over a long period of time, we've analyzed 4.2 million job changes right back to 2015. We've surveyed 4,500 job seekers, along with 2,000 UK workers, so really comprehensive, because we want to provide an overview of the trends over time. We're going to dig into some of those findings. We're going to talk about some of the motivations behind the changes and hopefully provide some meaningful insight to what this means for you and for your business. So if you like stats, we're going to get plenty of those in a second. We'll also be joined by 3 experts to discuss the research. We've got the Deputy CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, that's Kate Shoesmith. She'll be joining us. Talent Attraction Manager at Barclays via AMS, that's Charlotte Allen. And Senior Insight Manager here at Totaljobs, Zoe Wilkins, will also be joining our panel. You'll see a chat bot or a chat window at the side. It'd be great if we could answer your questions today. I've got plenty prepared for our panel, but we can make this more valuable for you all if there's anything that comes up that you'd like to talk about, so please let's do that. Before I go into it, most of you, I guess, probably are aware of Totaljobs. We're part of the 3rd largest online recruitment company in the world, that's Stepstone. And so in the UK, we help people do a lot of things. We're not essentially just job ads, although that is the major function of what we're doing, but we also help people everywhere from employer branding, psychometric profiling, global hiring, and particularly what I'm pleased about is Stepstone Insights and Zoe and the team. And so that's what we're here to talk about, really, is the data that we can derive and hopefully help you all make better decisions for your business in the future. So if I think about like state of play, we'll talk a little bit about like where are we right now, where are we coming from, and what do we see in the future, and then we'll dig in to the panel. But most of you will be aware vacancies currently sitting at 1.1 million in Q3. That's via the ONS. It's the highest since records began, with the largest increase being in retail, as we could probably guess. And interestingly, what I find about this is that unemployment rate is 4.5%, which is actually slightly higher than what it was before the pandemic. But we know the number of employees on PAYE is the same level pre-pandemic. So you know, we've got a situation where postings are at their highest level, vacancies at their highest level. There are people without roles right now, but yet we still see candidate activity being significantly lower today than it would have been pre-COVID. So this is just looking on Google Trends for any job search related activity and understanding really how many people are out there in the market. Different industries are facing really different situations. Obviously, I think we'll all be aware of the shortage of HGV drivers and some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing there. Hospitality is experiencing significant labor shortages. And then travel is also experiencing high demand as the UK changed the traffic light system. So some airlines seeing 3 times more bookings when that happens. So a lot of stuff happening. We also know that furlough finished a few weeks ago. I think there was maybe an expectation in some areas that we'd see a spike in redundancies. That doesn't appear to have happened. Obviously, we'll see more data over time, but that's certainly not what we're seeing right now. And like you say, you know, candidate activity is nowhere near close to pre-pandemic levels, never mind meeting the significantly increased demand for employers. Now, along with the data that we're going to talk about today, is we also run a report called the Hiring Trends Index. And what that is a conversation that we have with 1,000 HR decision makers and we have a look at what they're telling us about the recruitment landscape. So we know that 43% of UK businesses increased their recruitment in Q3, which is similar to what we saw in Q2, so really steady number there. And looking ahead, almost a third of businesses expect skill shortages to impact their success in the coming quarter, I think exacerbated by challenges around retraining, as well as overcoming the labour shortages that we discussed a little bit before. So even with all of those challenges and some of the realities of the situation, there's some pretty positive news there that 58% of businesses are pretty confident that they will be able to make the hires that they need. That's unchanged broadly from quarter two. And actually we see that 32% of businesses plan to increase their recruitment again over the next few months. So a pretty buoyant market from an openings perspective and a growth perspective, but obviously the challenge then is on the candidate side. So let's dig into our research. Clearly we're not out of the woods, but I think we can be a little bit more optimistic about candidate activity in the months ahead. Our research is showing that this is expected to rise. So the estimations from our survey suggest that 2 million UK workers are planning on changing jobs before Christmas. And 26% of UK workers are actively job hunting right now. And actually 6% of the workforce have already handed in their notice. So there's a movement is beginning to happen significantly more. And then I think when we talk to candidates, they feel increasingly confident in their job search. More or less half are more selective in the roles that they apply for. A similar number are really confident in negotiating terms with their new employer. 30% of people feel their skills are more valued now than they once were. And I think in the current market, making the most of kind of those career change trends, I think is a really useful viewpoint to give your business a bit of a competitive edge, and we're going to dig in to some of those. Before we do look at what the future looks like for employers, we'll have a little bit of a look at, well, what have we seen in the run-up to the current situation that we are today. So we've been looking at career change trends, trying saying that 3 times fast, over the last year. And of those who have found work in a different industry after being displaced by COVID, half of the people said that the career change was welcome. Obviously, it's forced in the world that we were living in, but actually people are pretty positive in their new landscape. 2 out of 3 candidates told us that the skills that they had previously developed were very useful in their new industry. The same amount think that they have a greater understanding of how valuable their skill set is after making the switch. And with this, 55% say they were surprised by how smooth the transition was. And I think this highlights the vital role that transferable skills play in successfully redeploying people into new industries. I think it should also give us confidence as employers that actually we can find talent in industries that are not our own and be confident that those people can be successful. So if we have a look at like in the kind of COVID period, if you like, we delved further to understand a little bit more about what was happening over the course of the pandemic. And about a third of career movers said COVID had made them reconsider their career options, with 22% having not considered switching industries at all until COVID had happened, and 28% moving sectors much, much earlier than planned. So it certainly was a forcing factor for a lot of people. For some, the pandemic put a pause on plans to switch jobs, whilst others found it difficult to find relevant opportunities. But many people did find a job, and it wasn't just a new role that they stepped into, but a new industry altogether. And we're going to dig in a little bit more to that in a second. Of those who did move industries during the pandemic, only 18% intend to return to their previous sector. So it shows that these moves, they're not a temporary measure. Candidates are seeing real potential in the new roles that they find themselves in. So like even before the pandemic, like industry switches clearly were not unusual. In our analysis of the 4.2 million job changes that have happened since 2015, we find that 52% of those changes had been into a new industry, which I think is a very significant number. And again, in this kind of candidate short market, it should give us all a little bit of confidence that we can look to different skills and different industries to fill our vacancies. So you can see all of this stuff for yourself. We've created an interactive career tracker tool, and you'll get a link to that. And interestingly, while we see some candidates reporting the role of COVID had played in their decision making, 31% said it had played no part at all. So we know that there's new and driving forces at play, but clearly the way the world works is also happening as it normally would. So before I go into the motivations of the career changes, I'll take a minute to explain a little bit more about our career change tracker. So it's free. It's a publicly available tool that you can use to compare job changes across 40 different industries. So if you're a social care employer, for example, you can head to the tracker, you see the percentage of people that are joining or leaving your industry, and even which industries they're coming from, which industries they're leaving to go to. And you can also see how your industry fares when it comes to retraining staff, for example. Zoe perhaps might talk about this a little bit at the end of our conversation, but we also do this for individual large organizations as well to help you understand what companies are your employees coming from and what companies are your employees leaving to go to help you understand how best to grow your business and keep and retrain your staff. So what is motivating the change? Well, I don't think it's a surprise for most of us when candidates say COVID played no role in their decision to make the change, but others felt it forced them to look outside of their industry due to the market conditions. 34% of COVID era movers changed industry out of necessity, compared to 18% who cited that reason pre-COVID. So clearly we see the driving factor there. But in the two lists that you can see on the screen, regardless of when people change industries, work-life balance, salary, and a simple desire for change are really consistent drivers. So although the order of priority shifts a little bit, those driving reasons are the same. And I think there's good lessons in here too, is like whilst people are switching industries and they feel more confident that they feel more confident that they can be successful, often the work that we're already heavily involved in is the right thing to be doing, even in a COVID world and with all of the changes that we're seeing. So let's have a little bit of a look at what we can expect to see in the months and years ahead. So at the start of the session, I noted that our research shows that 26% of UK workers are actively job hunting right now, and 6% have actually already handed in their notice. As a result, we expect there to be an uptick in candidate activity, and we can kind of see this in our own data at the moment. And regardless whether they've made a cross-industry move or not, 75% of job seekers say that they're more likely to consider a career change following COVID. So I think that's a positive statistic. And as debilitating as COVID has been, I think it's opened the eyes for many people to the opportunity that is out there. And people want to grasp that opportunity with both hands and try something different in their career. So I think there's, as I say, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So let's have a look at some of those motivations for industry movers. Career change trend is very much set to continue. I think we can see that. I guess as employers, we do need to make the most of this. Like I said before, is we're probably already working on the right stuff, but the priorities perhaps for individuals have changed. I think it's helpful to understand previous career changes, as we've already talked about, alongside that, what are encouraging people to leap into the new industry in their future. So I think better work-life balance is coming out on top. Flexible working is also in there. I don't think there's any surprises. I'm sure we're all having those conversations right now. There's been a lot of talk about flexibility, the need to be able to separate like home life, working life, and especially employee well-being. So I think that's fundamentally in this new world, something that we all need to pay significantly more attention to. Clearly, salary is always going to be there, but I think what's interesting is there continues to be a desire for personal development as well. People want to learn something new. They want to be able to challenge themselves. And I think this is potentially something that we're probably still a little bit behind on as employers, especially when you think about the business that we're in, about attracting talent and posting job adverts, etc. Is how often do we really include what people could learn in the role that they're applying for in the job description? Instead, we kind of talk about the requirements, and those are things that they're bringing ready-made to our businesses. But there's an opportunity to flip this, I think, and help candidates understand what are they going to learn in this role, what new skills are they going to be able to pick up when they come and join our organizations. And that's all kind of feeding back into that transferable skills piece that we know most candidates are understanding the value of significantly more these days. Retaining staff considering a change is clearly a challenge for us as well. So there's the opportunity to attract potential people coming into our industry, but obviously we want to make sure that where possible, we're retaining those staff that might have itchy feet to head out to a new industry. So we asked job seekers who were toying with the idea of a jump to a different industry, like what's going to encourage them to stay with their current employer instead. And for many, it's the same factors at play: salary, work-life balance, opportunity to learn something. Those are the things that are coming through a lot. But alongside that, the final three factors here are very much around the day-to-day job satisfaction, feeling more secure, safe in your work, in an environment where you're comfortable, as well as doing work that actually makes them feel good, gives a sense of achievement. So that's coming through quite strongly as well. And I guess this all comes back to ensuring that as a business, while we're building back after the pandemic, it's also making sure that not so focused on delivery that we forget about the people behind that delivery. So I think that's something that we need to be mindful for. And so what does that mean, essentially? What are some of the actions that we can take as employers? So keep adapting. Adaptability, it's been a pretty sought after trait over the course of the pandemic. And I guess it's going to continue to be the case. Prioritizing transferable skills over specialist skills or knowledge, I think is going to be relevant for quite many roles. And then what technical or role-specific knowledge can be taught, I guess it's the resilience, it's the adaptability, it's the flexibility, mindsets that are obviously harder to teach. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if we start identifying mentions of resilience and adaptability more in job ads this year. A great example of this adaptability in action, company Alliance Global Investors and Cisco, they set up an internal project marketplace that distilled work into tasks and projects that were then matched to people from all across the business. If you had those relevant skills, you were able to come into the project marketplace essentially and pick up new work. They enabled people who maybe had a lack of work during COVID to find opportunities within their business, but also is a really great way to utilize transferable skills and identify talent within our own organization. So certainly a great idea from those businesses. So I think I've spoken a fair bit about what to expect in the coming months and coming years. And with that, I think there's some things that businesses can bear in mind. So how do we help ourselves here? I think that we all know from many businesses at the moment, the challenges are very much like right here at the front door. You know, we're at the coalface, so to speak. Labor shortages are impacting our success. They're putting pressure on current staff as they try and cover kind of open roles. So I wanted to take a second, maybe just talk about some back to basics. You know, in a crowded market, how do you make the humble job ad stand out? So I think there's some pretty simple stuff, but it's really, really good to know, you know, make sure there's a recognizable job title, no jargon, no abbreviations. Talk about the salary that's on offer. We know that that can boost applications right from the off. I think the non-financial benefits in your organization also have similar abilities to boost conversion rate in job ads. And then I guess include what you're looking for in the candidate. Think about the soft skills and the hard skills. Think about appealing to those people that might be wanting to change career. In particular, the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, alongside the training that you have on offer. And I think that enables us to attract people from those new industries into our businesses. And then I think, as well as giving candidates context around how their role operates within your business, I would dedicate some time to talk about your DE&I initiatives, for example, corporate responsibility initiatives, or how you're giving back to your local community. What is your commitment to sustainability, etc. These things are proving to be really important to job seekers, and it's something that can help us stand out from the crowd. The research shows that candidates are placing a lot more importance on these, and for a lot, they won't even apply to the business that doesn't align with their values. So make sure they can easily find the information on your website. And I guess finally, I'd be thinking about the language that we're using in our job ads. You can check out your biased language within your job ads. So Totaljobs have a gender bias decoder, and sometimes how we phrase our postings can detract from the people that might want to apply. And we know we've seen a 15% uptick in women applying for roles when we use the gender bias decoder as well. So some really fundamental things that can help, fix the problems now, as well as obviously all of the longer term strategic stuff that I'm sure we're all working on. So before we move into the panel discussion, I guess a couple of key takeaways or considerations. I'd say if you're not doing it already, start to build out your recruitment plan so that it includes focus on potential career changes, on campaigns perhaps maybe that are targeted with candidates with a background in a certain industry that will bring valuable and transferable skills. Like I say, you can use our tool to help understand where people are coming from today. Be clear about what your business is bringing to the table beyond the remit of the role. Consider how you can attract the 3/4 of people that are considering a career change, and pitch the unique benefits of your industry, especially if you can offer candidates something that their previous sector couldn't. And like I say, the tools that we've discussed can help you get a head start with a lot of that stuff. Leading on from this, we know career ladder isn't particularly linear these days, and career shifts, job changes are commonplace. And I think people increasingly are searching for that work-life balance, the flexibility, or simply a job where they get more satisfaction out of and they feel more aligns with their values. So I would incorporate these factors into your value proposition when you're targeting career changes and ensure your message can resonate with them. As for retention, I think when you utilize data, it enables you to see the bigger picture, as well as the qualitative data that you have yourselves from exit interviews, etc. Especially if it's not direct competition that your staff are going to, but businesses in a different industry altogether, is understanding why that's happened can really help to create the right environment, the right benefits, the right training, the right investment for the team that you have today. So that's it for me. So no more rambling from Jon Wilson. So we get to get on to the best bit of today and onto our panel. So if I could ask our panel to unmute their cameras. And so we have Charlotte, Kate, and Zoe that will be joining us a second. Hello, Kate. And hello, Charlotte. And hello, Zoe.
Morning.
One thing I should probably say before we start, in my building today, and also Zoe's in the same building, I think we have a fire alarm that's going to go off in about 5 minutes. So Charlotte and Kate, when that happens, we might go on mute. And hopefully I will have asked you a particularly meaty question so that you can talk to the people who are viewing us whilst the bells are ringing. So perhaps we could start with you guys. Would you give us a brief introduction, who you are, what you do, and then we can talk about the questions. Charlotte, how about we start with you?
Sure, hello. My name's Charlotte. I have been working within attraction, so kind of recruitment marketing, talent community strategy, etc., for the last 6 or 7 years. But I realised actually I had my first interview for a recruiter job 10 years ago today. So I have been in recruitment for 10 years, which is terrifying. So I do come from that recruitment and sourcing background. I work predominantly within financial services and have been working with Barclays globally for the last few years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte. Kate?
Hello. So I've been at the REC for 8 years, so working in this environment for that long. So we're the professional membership body for UK recruitment. We set a standard for our recruiters. We represent over 80% of the market by value. And just to give you a context to UK recruitment, on any given day, there are about 1 million people working via an agency out on an assignment. So as an agency worker, a contractor, a freelancer, and every year there's 1 million people that get a new permanent job via a UK recruiter.
Well, you know, Kate, I heard a great stat the other day, is that there are more recruitment consultants in the UK than there are in the rest of continental Europe combined. So
well, it might explain, I think we are the 3rd largest market in the world. So we're behind the US and Japan. So that might explain that.
For sure. So good work being done there. Thank you, Kate. And Zoe.
Hi, I'm Zoe Wilkins, Senior Insights Manager at Totaljobs Group, as Jon mentioned before. So my background's really in consulting, which I've been doing for around the last 10 years. So similar to yourself, actually, there, Charlotte. And my role really is all about bringing the wealth of candidate and market data we have across our different brands to our customers, and really providing a bespoke HR analytics and advisory service, which we use to kind of provide context around the market, but also support customers' people strategies.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Zoe. Kate, and perhaps if we could start with you. Clearly, representing 80% of recruitment businesses by value means you probably got your finger on the pulse here a lot. So what do you anticipate will happen for the labour market in the coming months? Obviously, we've touched on a few things that we can see in the data, but really keen to get your perspective.
So we do a monthly survey. IHS Markit do it for us. They've done it for the last 24 years. They also do the PMI, the productivity, the purchasing index. So it's a robust study of what's happened in the month just gone. It appears at the beginning of every month. So report on jobs. And as your data is saying, we've been seeing that we have got unprecedented levels of demand. That we've not seen markets like this in the 24 years we've been doing the survey, and candidate availability is an all-time low. Actually, was the last month's, and that's had knock-on effects in terms of starting salaries and hourly pay rates, just as you'd think. When we looked at job adverts, we've been running Job Recovery Tracker to see what's happened over the pandemic. Since the end of August, we've added 600,000 new job vacancies in the UK. And we saw last week there was growth in job ads in all but 3 local authorities across the UK. So it's sector-wide, UK-wide in terms of the demand right now. And the feeling from recruiters generally that we speak to all the time is that that's going to be sustained for at least the short to mid-term, because if I just take some examples, people saying to me all the time, they've not known a market like this in 20, 30, 40 years of working in recruitment, in terms of that demand. And it's kind of clear why. You've obviously have a sense that there's been something of an economic downturn caused by an immediate issue in terms of a pandemic, which is quite different from other financial crashes we've seen. We've had Brexit combined with that, and we know that that's had an impact in terms of, in certain sectors particularly, people went home. So even though they may have been here when the Brexit deal was being negotiated, even when the EU referendum happened, as soon as the pandemic hit, they went home. So we know we've lost workers from that. So there's something there. But we also know that the short-termism of it all is that candidates' confidence to move roles. So it's really interesting seeing your jobs. It has been impacted over the last few months, and that's only just starting to return. So there's some reasons to think that we might start to recover in terms of that supply going up. But actually, some of the longer term things we're seeing, like aging populations, like the fact we've got long-term skill shortages in certain sectors.
So there's my fire alarm. So I'm gonna, you guys can hear that, I take it? Yes, okay. So Charlotte, can I ask what you're seeing? Obviously you mentioned that finance is the focus for yourself. You know, what have you seen, or how have you adapted, and how have you seen businesses adapt their hiring strategy over the period? Apologies for this, I'm going to go on mute now, but I'm going to let you talk, Charlotte.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to your point, Kate, it's absolutely been just such a strange time, and it is such a candidate-led market with the pandemic, and I think a lot of people have said that it's kind of changed their perception on work. You know, a lot of people have been able to kind of take a step back and think about what that means for them moving forward, and I think that there's had to be a real focus on kind of the authenticity of a firm, of the culture, what's actually happening in reality. I read a stat the other day that said something like 88% of millennials would only move if the culture was right, and a staggering percentage of those people thought that the culture was more important actually than the salary. Now I'm like, nah, that doesn't make sense. But actually, I've been approached for roles which have been 5 days a week in an office. I don't have any traditional caring responsibilities. I have absolutely no reason not to be in an office. But for me, if a company doesn't offer that and isn't really thinking about the future of work, then it's something that I wouldn't even consider. So I think that authenticity is really important. And I think also, you know, looking back over the last kind of 18 months, there has been a couple of changes. Firstly, I think it would be remiss to not talk about Black Lives Matter, putting a DE&I lens onto everything. You know, it's very important that companies really take on board some of the learns from that activity and really think about their workforce, but also that remote working piece. You know, we had to massively ramp up flexible working, remote working, the ability to work from home, the ability to work with children around. We had to make that work. And so I think that's going to be really interesting to see companies moving forward now, because if you trusted your workforce for a year, 18 months to work from home in the past, if you don't do that now, yes, I think there'll be some changes. So I think one of the other things that I guess is really quite relevant from your career change piece is obviously hospitality was massively affected, right, by the pandemic, and so we have had to be looking at ways of recruiting people from that sector, and not just into typical customer service roles, but I think also we're now starting to see a shift from teachers, nurses, ex-carers, all looking to move out of their professions and into something different. Where in such we have so many open roles, demand is going up and up and up. We have to be more flexible to attract different skills, and I think we do need to look for those transferable skills within our candidate pool.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. It's like we're forced into this massively flexible world, and now as everything begins to open up, what is the right mix there of, you know, what were the things that we lost from being separated? And I know well-being and connection, sense of community, like being able to work together is something that my team have missed a lot. But then there's also this element of, I love taking my kids to school, and it's really nice working out from home when I don't need to interact with people and I just need to focus. And how do we make sure that as a company, not only do we have something that is flexible, but we're also listening so that flexibility continues? I think when you read what's happening out there, I don't think anybody's got it quite figured out yet, but I think you mentioned the word at the beginning, Charlotte, about authenticity. Is like, what is the right way, the best way to get the best result for your business and your people? And I think always being curious about, you know, what is the right way, and not being too set in a rigid structure, probably will help us make better decisions on that front in the future. Zoe, I'm really interested on your perspective here. So you speak with tons of businesses who are already actively hiring outside of their industry. maybe share some examples or insights, perhaps even success stories that you're seeing from companies that are doing this already?
Yeah, of course. So I think as we've kind of referenced there, we've seen a lot of stories around hospitality and retail employees in particular flocking to industries with really high levels of transferable skills. So again, I think you mentioned there, Charlotte, you know, customer service in banking was a classic one, or customer service in telco, for example. But actually, I think that the success stories that really stick in my mind are the ones that are slightly more left field than that. So, for example, you know, we saw Formula One engineers from the likes of Red Bull or McLaren in the southeast actually joining major FMCG brands as electrical or mechanical engineers in their factories. It was really interesting to hear from those FMCG firms actually the innovation and the fresh thinking that was brought in, because I know particularly within that industry, it's kind of, if you haven't got Procter & Gamble on your CV, you're not welcome, you know, or whatever it might be. But actually what we were seeing is that these engineers were coming in world class and bringing that real kind of fresh perspective. And actually what we're now hearing some of those firms saying is that they're not happy with the level of tenure that they have in the organization. So whereas if you go back 2 years, maybe we were pushing to get that 10-year tenure up to a 12-year tenure, they're now pushing in the opposite direction actually, to try and drive, particularly from a contractor base, more churn, and to bring people from different industries to get that innovation piece, which is really, really brilliant. And I think we're also seeing that, you know, a great example is a really large telco in the UK who have applied that transferable skill mindset to themselves. So they realized actually all of our shops are shut during the pandemic. We're going to have to put all these retail workers on furlough. And actually what they ended up doing was standing up an internal IT skills program and taking the retail workers that had an interest in upskilling, in learning about tech, for example, and kind of cross-pollinating within their own organization. So on the one hand, they were solving the problem of not needing to furlough people, but they were also solving just a tech skill shortage that they had within their business. So again, I think really interesting to see that's now a long-standing, hopefully committed to a long-standing program on that. And again, with that innovation, that they're actually now reporting significantly reduced churn and higher employee engagement scores, not actually just with their retail staff, but across the business, because you know their people are reporting they feel cared about and they're seeing that. So there are, I guess, a couple of examples that stand out, that are slightly, as I say, left field, but really interesting from that innovation lens to actually you know make something positive out of the situation.
It's interesting what you say there. Like, even if I haven't changed my skills, if you like, if that's happening in my organization and I'm working with people who feel good about what they're doing and feel supported, and even if it doesn't impact me specifically, it makes my working experience that much better. Like, who doesn't want to come to work when the people that they're sitting next to are happy and feel good about what they're doing? Kate, I noticed you nodding along to some of those points. Actually, before I come to you, Charlie, I know that we gave everybody the opportunity to ask any questions. I don't know if there's any on there right now, but I'm going to throw that out to the people attending. So, Kate, I'm going to come to you a second, and then if anybody who's watching has a question about the data or any of our panel, then get your fingers going, and we'll come to you in a second. So, Kate, yeah, I saw you nodding along a couple of times.
We're definitely seeing people throwing their hat in the ring for something that's a bit different, and driven by lots of the reasons that Charlotte was talking about. So hospitality workers is the absolute archetype of this. Is that so when we're talking to recruiters working in the hospitality industry, they're saying that the people that were furloughed during the first lockdown, when things were opening up in March this year and they started to say, right, we want you back for some of these roles, they were going, actually, I don't know, I want to come back and do evening shifts or weekend shifts. And the biggest one was split shifts, which is just this nightmare scenario for those working in hotels and bars and restaurants. And so it's about how did the employers in some of those sectors change some of their thinking so that it's much more attractive. Right now, I'm getting anecdotes about paramedics being approached to be HGV drivers because of the shortages. So there's a big sense of what are we going to do to retain people in these essential jobs? I mean, these are absolute frontline services. We've got to make it attractive as possible to people, and we've got to recognise what the NHS has been through, the burnout that's been caused. There's a number of people working in the NHS that were due to retire or had retired and came back because, you know, their commitment to their sector. So how are we really recognising what people want from work, so that we can retain some of these people and attract new people in, rather than it looking like such a difficult job from the outside that you'd be mad to take on almost?
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of discussion through the COVID period about like essential workers and like how our lives just don't work when we're under pressure the way we are. But I still don't see the industry sitting around those being able to get to a point where we actually truly value those workers, so that you say, you know, it is a role that you want to go into. I think the care sector is one area where this is really prevalent. And I know whilst hospitality, we're experiencing widespread shutdowns, obviously from our perspective, we have a brand, caterer.com, which is really in and of that industry. And so we have lots of people looking for work, and obviously in the care sector, lots of demand in there. And we're able to kind of marry these two together, but for sure, you're never going to stay in a role that is that demanding, particularly when you've got a shortage of staff and then the work is being spread around those that remain, if they're not valued in terms of the right salaries, etc. there. And I think we did a webinar recently where we're pushing for the government to actually stand up really and come out with their care strategy on this issue specifically, because through the pandemic period, you just see the burning need to attract people into that line of work. So I think we've probably all spoken and seen the competitive market in the UK and how it's changing. I'm going to throw this one open to everyone, and then we're coming on to the panel questions. How do you think businesses can differentiate themselves to win candidates? I know I talked a little bit about like how do you work your advertising to help here, but is there any golden nuggets of advice from anyone on the panel?
I think for me, I think when we look at the recruiter role, it's also dramatically changed, right? And I think that sometimes when I'm looking at recruiter adverts, it's still very much focused on being on the phone all the time, you know, that really kind of transactional, tactical, this is the CV, this is the job, this is how they match. Whereas actually I think that the role of a recruiter has changed so dramatically. Certainly, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, but certainly over the time of the pandemic, in that really recruiters need to be almost like marketeers. We need to be focused on being digitally savvy. I think being digital is like the fundamental thing for any job ever right now. But recruiters need to be able to have that conversation. It's not so much about sales as it once was, or it was certainly when I was at my interview 10 years ago, and one of the questions was, how comfortable are you at, you know, lying? I remember that, and I don't think you were applying for. We won't talk about that. No, I think it has completely changed, and actually, what we need to do is to get the recruiters, who are the kind of the first face almost of an organisation, being really embedded in the activity, the corporate social responsibility, the DE&I strategy, and being able to really have those open conversations. I think, and also being honest, right? I think so often we give recruiters a list of, these are some great things to say, but actually that doesn't ring true. I was speaking to somebody the other day as part of a focus group, and not within any of my clients, just to be really clear, who said that they were really interested in the company because the imagery and everything showed lots of diversity. But throughout the entire interview process, they did not see another person of colour. And when they went to the recruiter and said, well, like, what's it actually like? You know, really honestly, all these pictures are showing lots of black people, but do you really have that? The recruiter say, yes, absolutely, absolutely. needless to say, she started on her first day. There was one other black person on the entire floor, and she quit after 3 weeks. So, you know, if candidates are able to choose what they want and where they're looking for, what they're looking for, I know personally I'd rather someone said to me, do you know what, we've not got it yet. We're not there. You know, I interviewed someone the other day who asked me about my company's stance on climate policy. And I was like, that's not one that I've got on the top of my mind. But I think, and then she appreciated the fact that I was honest, that I went to go and find out, that I, you know, said actually that's not something that I've really thought about. I'm not got myself embedded in. It's something that we want to listen to our employees. We want to pass that knowledge on. We want to share, and then therefore it was kind of accepted. So I know I talk about authenticity all the time. I think I'm like obsessed with it. But I think the openness and the honesty, the real clear narrative that we're trying to say, and don't lie about it, I think is fundamental for getting on the front foot with candidates.
I think that's fantastic advice, and I think it's just that, like, people want to work with people that they respect, that they like, that they share ideals and values with. And
Jon,
like
can
you
I
said,
just
yeah, go on.
I just wanted to add, I couldn't agree with what Charlotte's saying more, to be honest, but I think unless you're being a true consultant now, then you're not going to get very far. Like, you need to really understand where the client is coming from and what's behind what they want to do, and quite honestly advise them if they're looking for the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong place. You've got a duty to do that, and the same goes with your candidates. It's that consultative piece, and that's how it feels like it's changed to me. And you can only be a true consultant if you're being authentic, and I'm completely with you about, it is no good having a list of values or behaviors or a set of culture ideals on your website if then what people experience during the recruitment process doesn't live up to that. People know whether it's fake or not.
Yeah, I think this is really good advice. Charlie, I'm going to just pause here a second to see we've got about 15 minutes left. Are there questions from anyone watching? Do you want to highlight? I hope there's questions.
Yeah, there are questions, and just to say, if you have got a question for our panelists, please do drop them in the chat function and we'll try and get to them as we go through. But let's start with this one. For employers in industries who are less able to work remotely or struggle with flexibility, are we looking at a growing issue with poor retention in the future?
I think, you know, one of the industries that we've seen come back fastest at the moment is the retail sector. And clearly in retail, you know, you can't sit behind a till from home. And I guess certainly the data shows that those sectors are bouncing back. But I would love to pass over, Kate, perhaps with your experience in the recruiting companies and also the reports that you are penning. What do you see on that front?
So there is a sense of how do you offer flexibility for people where there's maybe some roles it just doesn't feel like it's going to be possible, but I think there are always ways in order to ensure that there's an element of flexibility, and it's about having that conversation with somebody about what they're looking for. Of course, there's going to be thinking about if we go back to the care example and working in health in particular, the likelihood is that you're going to need to be in a different place than working from home, but the flexibility that can be offered is what are the hours, what works for somebody else, and how do you fit that in and around other responsibilities that you might have at home, and I think there is, and we've got one of our members is called Timewise. They do great work on flexible working. They've just done a fabulous piece in the construction industry about, okay, you need to be on site, but what does flexibility look like even in the construction industry? And it is possible. So I think there are ways of looking at it in a much more open way, and the pandemic's done some of this for us.
Yeah, I think if I can jump in there, I think talking around, you know, flexibility when it's a role that kind of needs to be at least partially on site, if not entirely on site, we're really seeing employers from our data starting to pick up on that. So across the last 6 months, for example, I think it's about an 89% increase we've seen in what we call familiar terms. So 9 to 3 appearing in the job advert, or, you know, school drop off, school pickup, all of those different areas of actually, yes, you do have to come to site, but you can also take your children to school in the morning, or that piece as well. Because I think one of the biggest challenges we heard about when talking to customers who had a large contingent of maybe, you know, water engineers, for example, was actually how do you then manage that tension between those at the firm that have to be on site and those, you know, the other that can stay at home as well. So again, I think it's, again, just being really, really honest and upfront at the beginning of the recruitment process about what the job is and what flexibility there is or there isn't, because firms we've seen performing really, really well in this regard tend to have lower application levels, if I'm perfectly honest, but significantly higher relevance, because they've said, guess what, this is the job. We're going to put a bit of a premium on it to make it worth your while, but that's what it is, and moving on. So I think that kind of honesty piece comes through again there, but we are really seeing employers start to talk about family life and home life significantly more than just working from home or remote coming through.
That's great. Thank you both. Charlie, let's see if we can make sure that we answer as many questions as we possibly can. Anything else on there?
Yep. We can expect a growing number of green jobs in the future. Do you expect the career change trend will have a positive or negative impact for the green economy?
I think what I would say here is when we look at people coming into the job market, millennials, you talked about, Zoe, that aligning values is sometimes more important than money. And this is really one of those industries that really does align to values. So again, I'm not coming in as the expert, but more in actually what are we seeing in the data? What are people saying? How does that marry up with the question? And I would have to say that the trends about what people care about are very much moving in that direction. And as this industry grows and we create jobs, again, it's that movement from one industry to another that we all got to be mindful of. And we talked a moment ago about flexibility and when you're on site, etc. We need these roles to continue. Clearly, there's tons of industries that we need people on site to do that. So what is that doing to how we communicate with our staff, how we think about our benefits, how do we think about flexibility? Are we listening and evolving and changing? And I think certainly COVID has been an accelerator for this kind of thought leadership, but certainly it was there before, is that ability to continue to evolve and adapt and perhaps think about how you pay people differently, I think is more prevalent. But I would certainly suggest that the green jobs will be attractive for people coming through, certainly from what we're seeing in the data. Happy to pass over to you guys if you have thoughts on that.
I think we had some green jobs actually that were unusual, and the original brief was we want all of this experience and all of this stuff, and it's like, yeah, this doesn't exist, right? It's like that meme for the guy, I can't remember what language it is, but he the job advert that says I'm looking for 10 years experience in this job language, and he says, oh, I didn't invent it until 7 years ago or something like that. So but you know, I think we were able to look at the insights and really quite clearly talk to that manager about the fact that the only way you're going to get this is someone that's passionate about it and has transferable skills. I think, you know, I'm moving into a D&I role in my current position at the moment. I don't have any D&I experience apart from what I've done as on the side of my desk, like everybody else has done. But I'm passionate about it, and I've got a good understanding of project management and brands. So actually, I'm able to move into that role without having that previous experience. And I think that as we move forward and we kind of start to be that consultant that you referred to, Kate, it's around really being able to provide that information back to the business to say there needs to be transferable skills. We need to look at this. We have to be more flexible on our requirements, whether it's from a university perspective, a qualification perspective, someone that's in the office 5 days, whatever it might be. We do need to just be a bit more flexible. And the people that we found were absolutely completely different from what the brief was, but really had that passion and really, to your point, John, aligned with their values and what they wanted to get out of life.
And certainly we see in the data that not only are people changing industries, but they're very capable of doing that. They're being successful. They find it more than possible. And I think as employers, that should give us all confidence that actually we can do what you just described, Charlotte. Charlie, back over to you.
We've got a question come through for Charlotte. What is one best retention strategy that Barclays have applied that you can share with us?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think that one of the best things about Barclays is that they really care about their people. They care about their colleagues. So one of the things that we have within Barclays is a really, I don't know, I think best in class internal mobility scheme. So this scheme is not just about encouraging people to apply for different jobs, but actually we have a career coaching service. So if you work for Barclays, you can actually spend time with a career coach to talk about where your career is going, what your next steps are. Any internal colleague that has is invited to an interview is able to get support in terms of what to do in that situation. And we've had some really great success from that. And I think the fact that they care the fact that they put money into this sort of program and employ people to do that, I think is kind of fundamental to the fact that it makes people feel that they're a part of something, that there are opportunities, that there's progression. So yeah, that's probably the main one for me.
Nice, thank you, Charlotte. Charlie, any more?
Yes, I think we can finish with one last one. Yeah, we've got time. Yeah, when attracting candidates from different industries, if this is quite a natural trend, would you specifically target people from relevant sectors or mention those industries with the job adverts, or just let the trend take its course?
I'll talk to the data here and then pass over to the experts. I think the career change tracker, that the tool that we've created, helps you understand where people are moving from and where they're moving to. I think rather than necessarily targeting or mentioning those industries specifically, because you can isolate as well as attract with that strategy, I think it's understanding what is it that's going on there that is helping people into your industry, and what is happening in your industry that is potentially creating a path out of it to others. And I think to understand the drivers and then appeal to the drivers, I think is probably the smartest way I would do it. Like I say, if you try and specifically target people from a specific industry by mentioning it in your job ad, you may proactively headhunt that way. But if you're advertising to a wide audience, then I think you stand a chance of isolating as well as attracting in that sense. But I'm really happy for you guys to come in on that.
I think it's a lot about the messaging. I've recently run a campaign which was attracting ex-carers, and I think we know them financial services people go, oh God, it's too scary, it's finance, we don't know what that is. So the messaging was, we're just looking for people like you that are empathetic.
We can still hear you, Charlotte. Oh. I think we've lost Charlotte. Kate, obviously you're of the industry as well. What's your thoughts here?
I'm with you, John, in that you might shut down pathways for people, because we know that there's. I was interested earlier when you were you had your gender bias tool, and I think there's other things we've looked at it from an age as well. Is there's certain language that can put people off, even unwittingly, that unconscious bias, and you don't know that it. And I think that but it's about identifying what's the skill set that you require. And being clear about that, because that's then people can identify with it much more easily, rather than thinking, oh, you want somebody who comes from a particular role or sector.
Yeah, I think my biggest bugbear is the copy and pasting of job descriptions and kind of going, I'm just gonna, like 75% of it is the same as something else I picked up somewhere else. You're not actually saying what it is that you want and what it is that you need. And often you talk about the gender bias decoder, is we also know that by putting erroneous essential skills in your job description, it just alienates so many people, because there's a ton of people will go, well, they're after these 8 things, I only have 7, therefore I'm not going to apply. When actually you don't really want those things. So obviously there's some good sense in there as well. So I think we lost Charlotte, unfortunately, but we're right up there on time. Zoe, Kate, Charlotte, thank you so much for attending this morning. Charlie, thank you very much for being the technical lead in the background, and Ellie helping me with my slides. Much appreciated. So you'll get a copy of the deck as well as links to Gender Bias Decoder and the job change tracker. And if we can help with anything else, then please let us know. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy week, which I'm sure you're having right now. Thanks again. See you all later.
Thanks.